Just when you thought Joe Biden couldn't stoop any lower, get ready for this. He just claimed that unless the world does something about it, climate change will threaten the very existence of the planet itself. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV. Just when you thought the level of Biden hyperbole had reached its max, when his plagiaristic deceptions and his deflections and dodges, all so easily excused by pop media,
well, I'm not sure you should assume I'm not corrupt, but thank you for that though,
had filled one's head from ear to ear, the former VP takes it to another absurd level, joining the charlatan Al Gore on the apocalyptic climate crisis train.
I've done some dumb things, and I'll do dumb things again.
As Tom Elliott tweeted on December 28th, his hyperbolic nonsense is just as hyper and nonsensical as Gore's was when he began pushing his inconvenient untruth.
You're right, though. When I was first approached with the idea of making the slideshow into a movie, I thought it was a terrible idea.
Elliott grabbed a video capture of Smokin' Joe on CNN, complete with bobblehead-nodding Kamala Harris in the background, telling people that the U.S. population accounted for 15% of so-called climate change emissions.
The United States accounts for less than 15% of the global carbon emissions. But without clear, coordinated, and committed approach from the other 85% of the carbon emitters, the world will continue to warm. Storms will continue to worsen. Climate change will continue to threaten the lives and livelihoods, public health and economics of our existence and literally, the very existence of our planet.
Well, how very end of the world-ish, Joe.
What happened, Mommy?
I don't know, baby.
Come on, man.
Thank you for putting those things into needlessly alarmist language. Language based on such deeply flawed assumptions that it's necessary for sane people who believe in the scientific method, natural rights, the proper definition of words, and the proper operation of the feds under their U.S. Constitution to get a few things straight. First, the assumption that the globe is alarmingly warming has been exposed as unfounded. As Mark Morano showed in 2018, satellite climate data shows that between 1995 and 2013, there was no measurably significant global so-called warming, which is why early climate alarmists switched from using the term global warming to the more malleable climate change, so that any change, up or down, or even a non-change, could be attributed to anthropogenic causes. This despite the fact that the climate doomsayers have been shown to have not taken into account the loss of relatively cooler temperatures when the Soviet Union fell and, for many years, Siberian temp readers no longer supplied their relatively cooler temperatures because they were no longer being funded by the Soviet Union. And this despite the fact that ClimateGate exposed UN International Panel on Climate Change scientists at the University of East Anglia in England communicating with each other to engage in what appears to be data manipulation to make up a warming narrative. This again, despite the fact that the book Unstoppable Global Warming Every 1500 Years noted long ago the factor that seems most closely correlated with the Earth's climate is solar activity. And how about the fact that Al Gore's disastrously mislabeled documentary An Inconvenient Truth?
An Inconvenient Truth. It's a hit movie and a best-selling book, but actually it's, as you say, a slideshow. And a slideshow, just the word could make you yawn.
Was put on trial in a UK court because concerned parents were sick of the government schools pushing its falsehoods on their kids. And indeed, the court ruled that the film was so far from being a documentary that it was akin to propaganda and that if schools were to show it, they had to offer kids a disclaimer and information about all the false info in it. Or how about the very premise of the anthropogenic climate change cult? That being the idea that man-made carbon emissions, and by the way, the US economy is built to reward businesses that find ways to conserve energy rather than waste energy, and those businesses in America have been leading the way in decreasing carbon emissions for years, as Forbes has reported. Or rather than calling it man-made carbon emissions, why don't we just call it carbon dioxide? Because that's the main gas everyone points to. The idea that carbon dioxide drives up temperatures here on Earth the way that it does in a completely different environment, such as Venus. Well, that is highly questionable as well. And it's this assumption about carbon dioxide that is at the heart of Biden's blundering bluster about the end of the planet. And it was belied by Al Gore himself, who stood before his own graph and did two things. First, he didn't show people in his film that before the start of his graph, the Earth had been much warmer, which is where the term medieval warming period comes from, and why Vikings could grow crops in Iceland during much of the Dark Ages. Second, Gore's graph contains two lines, and Gore offers them to the audience while letting them assume that a rise in CO2 leads to a rise in temperatures some years later. But there stood Gore before his own graph, actually never telling people that on the graph, the first line that rises isn't CO2. It's global temperature. And CO2 rises later, decades later. So just like the Far Side cartoon child pushing the pull door at the school for the gifted, Al Gore stood before the very thing that exposed him for a buffoonish deceiver, parading all around in front of people without any scientific knowledge, evidence, or awareness. And Biden, well, what a shock. He does the exact same thing. I think perhaps what's most troubling about it is the fact that pop media like CNN allow him to put this stuff out there, and then, of course, their double standards. They'll question Trump on virtually everything. They'll question a Republican or a conservative or a libertarian. But Joe Biden? No, not a problem. We need to clamp down on everybody's businesses, destroy the economy, and yeah, not question it. Thanks, CNN. Thanks for nothing. And Joe, thanks if you'll just leave us alone. We're doing fine without you. Hey, thank you, however, for watching. Remember, if you are new, please like and subscribe. And if you are returning, I'll see you in the comments section. Please join us at Facebook, at Instagram, on Parler, and on Twitter. And if you get the opportunity, head over to MRCTV.org because you'll see what the whole team is doing. And if you want some great items, go to MRC-Store. Thanks so much for joining me, everyone. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.